As long as you are well aware of what your costs are, I think that gives you the freedom to build your actual profit and your margin in different ways and kind of make it a little more flexible for who you're trying to engage with.
Coffee's for closers only.
So we've established my proposal is sound in principle. Now we're just haggling over price.
Let's see how much we're going for on eBay.
It's the same as Dunkin' Donuts. Costs 15 times the price.
Welcome to Impact Pricing, the podcast where we discuss pricing, value, and the managerial relationship between them. I'm Mark Stiving. Today is the first episode of our season of Pricing Executives. I'm looking forward to this season. We're going to do 5 to 10 episodes in a row just to learn how pricing executives think. Today, our guest is Curtis Garrett. Here are 3 things you want to know about Curtis before we start. He started out in forestry in Dublin, Ohio, and I lived in Dublin, Ohio for 4 years when I was a professor at Ohio State, so that's awesome. He's been in logistics since 2007, and he is currently the VP of Pricing and Logistics at Recon Logistics. Welcome, Curtis.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me. And I may have pruned your tree back then. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? So how did you get into pricing?
I more so got into the industry itself and then kind of evolved into the pricing and yield side of things. So originally, started working for one of the very best Less-Than-Truckload freight companies in the industry, Old Dominion Freight Line, and worked in more operations roles and really just evolved into, what I found interesting and what challenged me. And now almost a decade later, I've been pretty firmly on the pricing side of things.
Yeah. This whole concept of less than truckload sounds like it's really complicated to figure out how to price it, how to even build products around that.
It can be, for sure. It, obviously the 30-second version of what less than truckload is, it's typically any shipment in the freight world that falls between 1 and 8 pallets, I would say, on average. And so it's definitely a combination of, your small parcel providers and then your truckload carriers. Basically, you're utilizing the economies of scale similar to a small parcel provider with having multiple shipments on the same trailer, but it is big, heavy freight that requires loading docks and forklifts to move. And so you're under the same physical constraints as what a full truckload carrier would be. So it's very interesting. The longer I'm in it, I'm never leaving. It keeps pulling me in deeper and deeper. It's industry-wise, it's somewhat comparable to airline and hotel pricing, but it's even more complex in my opinion because, a seat on an airplane or a room in a hotel, you pretty much know there's no space variable there. But with LTL freight, you really don't know the size of the freight you're going to get and how much room it's going to take up in your trailer.
Yeah, and not only is it not variable in terms of size, but a truck can go anywhere, where a hotel room is always in the same spot, or a plane flight is always from point A to point B.
Right. That is where less than truckload is a little more similar to an airline, because they do have their terminals and hubs, and they kind of have a set line haul network. So their trucks only run on the same routes every day. And that's why, they're kind of a mix between the truckload and parcel mode, because during the day they have their P&D or pickup and delivery drivers, and they're going around every city in America in a 53-foot full-size semi-truck, and they're delivering and picking up freight, and then they bring it back to the terminal in the evening, and it gets consolidated and loaded up on line haul trailers with, similarly destined shipments. And that's where kind of the longer haul network comes into play. They run typically overnight. They'll run typically doubles in the LTL world. So that's 2 smaller trailers hooked together because it totals more than 53 feet in trailer length. So it's a little more efficient. So yeah, it's their networks are defined and their trailer space is defined, but not similar to, somebody renting a hotel room or sitting in an airplane seat. You can have a single shipper taking up half your trailer some nights, and the next night, it's not that way. So there's a big unknown to it.
Got it. So you're playing the same yield management game that hotels and airlines do, and then you've got the hub and spoke system. Sounds totally fascinating, and I can see why you love it so much. So let's talk about your career, and let's talk about pricing and things like that. How pricing professionals should be doing, and how do they do that? First off, did you have mentors during your career? And if so, what were they like? What did they do for you?
Yeah, I've definitely had, I would say, some accidental mentors because I started in the industry kind of on the ground level, in the field, doing operations. I mean, one that's given me a huge benefit so that now when I'm dealing, with the numbers, it's connected to some sort of a real world activity for me. So it's not just like a number on a spreadsheet. But the other thing with kind of taking that route is, I didn't enter my career as on a fast track or any sort of like management training program or anything. So I just came across people that had a lot to offer, and I felt like I was pretty discerning in who I kind of hitched my wagon to and took advice from. But definitely, one of the key people is a guy named Todd Poland. He's the VP of pricing at Old Dominion, and he's a big reason for their profitability and success. And since leaving there in 2016, I've stayed in touch with him and probably have gotten, closer from a mentor type relationship since I left than when I was there, actually. But yeah, it's such a nuanced business that if you do luck out and you find somebody who has a lot of common sense and logic and realize that everything doesn't really happen in a vacuum, as Todd used to say. Nothing's in LTL is really black and white. There's a lot of gray. So if you can find someone that looks at things that way, but also has, the hard skills and technical knowledge, obviously that's a win-win. So that's what I found from him. And, the past companies I've been at in the last 4 or 5 years, I've definitely taken a lot away from the ownership. I've found that I've worked for people that have finance backgrounds and very, very quantitative driven or data driven skill sets. So that's been really good learning from people like that.
Nice. Yeah, I remember probably my favorite mentor, a guy named Jeff Gagne. He didn't teach me about pricing or statistics or anything. He taught me about people. And that was just incredible. When you find someone that can teach you such a valuable skill, it's like, oh, please, just keep teaching. Keep an open mind and go learn. I love that.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Do you have a team of pricing people working for you now?
Yep. I've got a small team at the company I'm at now, Recon Logistics, but in the day-to-day, I find myself still engaging with, annual increases from the carriers from a procurement side and also, trying to assist with Recon's just value add and what we do for our customers and, helping establish fee structures and pricing models for our clients as well.
Yeah, so you're still getting your fingers dirty, but you've got people that are probably their hands are dirtier than yours, doing more of the work. So
I'm definitely very dirty still, but I'm a player coach, I would say. I've definitely got help, but at the same time, I have to manage a team and interact with management from other departments, and definitely have a good grasp on the inputs and outputs of the entire business and how that all works and interacts together.
Yeah. So as we talk about your team, imagine for a second, what are the characteristics, and you could take pieces from each of the people who work for you or just think outside the box, but what are the characteristics of the people who work for you that you would want before you promoted them?
I think, overall, one of the most important things is just kind of having a sense of ownership and pride in the work that you're producing, and having the viewpoint that, it's not just something to check off a to-do list or a task or, a widget to process or whatever that may be. But, see it as something you're creating, producing, and ultimately responsible for, before it goes on to somebody else. So whether that's doing some sort of analysis on my behalf or maybe for one of our clients, just double, triple checking things, making sure it's as up to your current knowledge base and experience level. It's as perfect as it can be before it leaves your desk, so to speak. So I think that is a value, before you can really get promoted and be responsible for other people in addition to yourself. You just have to expect a lot out of yourself and the quality of work you do. And, what goes kind of hand in hand with that, but it is worth being called out as well, is just, executing and taking action. A lot of ideas are out there floating around, but if you can truly nail that idea down, and whether it's reverse engineering, a result that you want, or just figuring out what the first few steps that kind of get you on the path and doing them to the best of your ability, being able to quantify what needs to be done and actually execute it is very important too.
Yeah. So I actually like both of those answers. I want to jump back to the one where in my mind, I was thinking, oh, so they have to care, right? So yes, they have to care. And in my mind, I'm thinking, that if you're putting together a report or a study or an analysis, somebody's about to go make a decision based on the stuff that you just put together. So do you really care about the outcome of that decision? Right. And I think that's huge. So let me give you one more big thought that I always struggle with, even when I teach this to companies, when I teach pricing or value or anything to companies. Oftentimes we're limited based on some type of constraint that's going on in the company. So it could be that finance does finance this way, and yet it would be awesome if we could do pricing this other way, and we'd have to change the way we do finance. Or maybe the IT systems don't allow us to go do something that would be really profitable if we could go do this. And I think about these as really big projects. And the idea of looking around and saying, oh my gosh, if I could change this, we would be so much more profitable. But now whatever this is, needs to be a really conscious decision, right? Am I going to go spend time and energy pushing against this wall, trying to move it, or am I just going to do my job? So how do you think about your people when you're thinking about, do you want them to go push on walls? Do you want them to do their job? What's the trade-off there?
Well, I think two things kind of come to mind immediately. Things like that are always going to come up in any organization. You're going to have, a single person or maybe an entire department that believes in the way that something should be done. Maybe that's changed or adjusted from the way it's currently being done. And you're right. It's going to be like, bumping into a wall. There's walls everywhere in business, unfortunately, because that's the byproduct of all the different processes and SOPs, we have to have in place in order to kind of keep things standardized and keep it organized. So that's going to be a never ending problem. I think breaking things down, to a smaller, more achievable level, as in maybe don't rush the hill right now, but, put yourself in a little bit better of a place strategically for, more of a bigger change down the road. So, I mentioned reverse engineering earlier, and that's, I guess, what I'm referring to here too, is figure out, what is the absolute best way that you think a process or something should be ran for the company, and work backwards until you get to, the size of a change or just a task or what have it that is achievable, and start with that. And then once you're doing that, see what size of the next item you can bite off. And then balance too is always important. There's always more than one way to do things. I kind of think of a Rubik's Cube, it is what it is to solve a Rubik's Cube. There's no disputing, the colors all having to be the same on each side, but there's more than one way to get there, and
Yep.
you can make little twists and adjustments, along the way. So it's the balance of keeping that larger macro strategy in your mind, but, in the day in, day out, or even minute by minute, making sure that what you're doing is the best possible work at that time. And there's a lot of little victories along the way, and probably a lot of little losses too, but it all has to net out to the overall strategy, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I love teaching pricing and value, but I get a little frustrated. It's hard to implement what you've learned after just one class. There are always nuances to what you learn in a classroom that just aren't easy to recall when you're trying to implement them in your own real world project. To most, pricing feels so risky. To solve this, we've come up with our part-time pricing expert programs. In each program, I learn enough about your business to guide you as you explore and implement new pricing capabilities and new value discovery approaches. We've put together 3 distinct programs to assist with a range of scenarios, from a single project or to help a team within your company improve their decisions to developing your own in-house pricing expertise. I think pricing is fun, and you might too if it wasn't so scary. If a little guidance, expert counsel, and sound advice would be a benefit on your next pricing initiative, please reach out to me at mark@impactpricing.com. We only have room for a few more companies. I think that's one of the hardest decisions is, should I go push against a wall or not? And I love the answer that you gave was, well, let's take small steps. Let's see if we can move the needle a little bit and see if we can prove that it's worth pushing against a wall. So I think that makes a ton of
Yeah, I
sense.
don't think any wall that can be pushed over is the right wall you should be pushing against anyways, right? So if it is something, of value and the right problem to be solving, I think by default, it's going to take a while, and it's going to be hard.
Yeah, it always takes a while and it's always hard. I agree completely. Do you think that those are the people who get promoted? The people who find a really good wall that needs to be pushed on and they strategically work on it and get there? Or do you think it's people who don't push against walls and do their job, the job that's expected of them, relatively well?
Honestly, I think the answer is both. I think people that don't push against walls and just carry out instructions are likely to be promoted, but it may be in a different path than somebody who's just running and trying to knock over every wall in their way. So I think a lot of it depends on, your company culture and the structure, of the constraints you're working within, what's coming down from senior leadership. Probably those who are more apt to push against walls are, those that might work in smaller companies where they have to wear more hats, but decisions can be made a lot quicker. There's less bureaucracy to push through, or maybe even entrepreneurs and go into business on their own. So I'm not trying to take the easy out, but I think the answer to your question is both. The outcome just looks different.
Yeah, no worries. No worries. Yeah, in my mind, I can't imagine somebody pushing against more than one wall at a time, right? Because I pushed a wall over when I was a practitioner, and it was a lot of work. Oh my gosh. And I just can't imagine doing more than one of those at once. So.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you can try to, but the amount of your force is going to be obviously diluted a little bit. So
Yep.
Math says that you can't effectively push more than one at one time.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So Curtis, I got to ask, and I just so the listeners know, I asked Curtis if I could ask him about this before we started, but you didn't graduate from college. Has that affected your career? How has that affected your career? What do you think is going on there?
Yeah, no, you're right. I didn't. I probably have in total, maybe 3 of a 4-year degree that I've completed over the past. And I haven't been actively working on it for at least 5 years. I'm 35 now. So, over a decade, I probably worked on it here and there. But honestly, in my specific experience, I think it's better than if I had, because when I started in this industry, it was always a placeholder, and it was just while I was in school. It wasn't where I saw myself long term. I didn't know anybody or have any family in the freight industry. So for me personally, it's what kept me in the industry, and then I just kept, growing my skill set and getting more experience. And really, I mean, my 8 years at Old Dominion Freight Line was kind of like my LT or my bachelor's and maybe even my master's in LTL, because I did enough there operationally. I actually got my CDL and drove for a little bit, then went into pricing, costing, that sort of thing. So yeah, for me, it's worked out. And I just at some point decided that practically, looking at my life, finishing that up and getting that piece of paper, I don't think would have made my career any more successful. I'm happy with the way things are right now. And if anything, the stuff I'm starting to branch out into with little creative side projects and websites and different things that are, connected to my industry also, that can be done, by anybody without any sort of credentialing or degree or not. So if you have a good idea, the way the economy's going, the way businesses are going to operate in the future, and you spend some focused time on one field or one industry, I think anybody can be successful. And if there are large companies out there that hold back candidates just because of that one disqualifier, then, I think they're probably missing out on a lot of good people.
Yeah. So the first question I want to ask about this then is, early in your career, what was going through your mind? Were you thinking, oh, I really need to get my degree?
Yeah, I definitely was earlier on. And part of that is just, the upbringing I had. I had an uncle that went very far and ended up going to Yale, and he's a professor now. And so I was exposed to, you finish high school, you get a degree, and then you find your real job or your real career, and it all just kind of seamlessly flows that way. So that was just my young lack of experience on how the real world works. But over time, as I had more capital, and I invested more time and had more skills in not only the industry I'm in, but also, a lot of stuff that is transferable to other industries, it became less of a focus, I guess.
Yep. Cool. And I was hoping you would just say these words, but I have to ask it. What did you tell me about the interview when you first interviewed to be a VP?
Yeah, so that's kind of, looking back now, that's where I truly decided that, at least at this stage of my life, I didn't need to finish that degree in order to advance my career. So, about 4 years ago, I was interviewing for a vice president position at a smaller company, and the entire interview was just based on my abilities and experience, and never was asked, where I went to school or what it was for. So that truly showed me, at least in that scenario, that, it didn't need to be a security layer for me. I guess I could do okay and basically do the work I like to do with, a team of people I like to work with, and make a decent living. And that wasn't dependent on having a degree finished.
So I first just thank you so much for being so honest about that. It's hard for me to talk about it because I have a million degrees, but as I look at them and I think of how I use them and how I would interview and how I see interviews, I think people rarely look at that degree. So, I think too many people overemphasize getting the degree. Not that I'm against college, don't get me wrong, but I think too many people overemphasize it. So I'm thrilled that you're willing to share that. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. And I think, there's obviously so many nuances, and certain careers definitely require it, and that's very understandable. But I think it's more the credentials that carry more weight than the degree itself. So if someone does go on to a doctorate as you did, or, even a master's of some sort, or some sort of professional degree or certification, the MBA, of course, that's what carries the weight. That's what they want to have after their name. But at the same time, I try to take the econ approach to it and just boil things down to to some cost and ROI. And, for me, it just made sense to kind of stop that journey on the academic side.
Yeah. And I guess the other thing I'll toss out, and it was pretty obvious from what you said, and definitely from the way my life has gone, I think degrees give people confidence early on in their career, and not having a degree kind of takes confidence away until you realize it's not the degree, it's your skills. It's what you know and can do. And that just takes a little while to get there. So.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that can be positive or a negative, I think, on both sides. Having that early confidence can really give you a push and help you go a lot further. And then on the flip side, if you really just have kind of not that I should equate it to this, but what you hear from successful immigrants that came, maybe to the United States when they were younger, they didn't really have any sort of confidence building network or security level. So they just fell on them and their hard work and determination.
Yeah, no, I agree. So Curtis, I know we haven't really talked about pricing much at all, and it's time to wrap up, but I have to ask this last question. What's one piece of pricing advice that you would give our listeners that you think could have a big impact on their business?
Kind of going back to what I learned, during my time at Old Dominion, working under Todd there, you got to start with the numbers and the data, but to truly get to, a successful long-term customer relationship and fair agreement to where you're giving them value and they're, you're making money off of it and they're happy with what they're receiving and they're paying a fair price. I mean, you just have to add a few layers of nuance and common sense. And, obviously I'm talking more business to business type pricing. I know it's different when you're pricing widgets and dealing with consumers and whatnot, but from a service, pricing services, you got to be open to different pricing models. And as long as you are well aware of what your costs are, I think that gives you the freedom to build your actual profit and your margin in different ways and kind of make it a little more flexible for who you're trying to engage with, I guess.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Very wise answer. So Curtis, thank you so much for your time today. If anybody wants to contact you, how can they do that?
Yeah, so I'm currently working for Recon Logistics. ReconLogistics.com is our website. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I've got a few side projects that are, they're LTL specific, although I'm about to launch curtisgarrett.co, which will kind of be my personal headquarters online where I'm going to write and kind of share my thoughts. And I really enjoy talking about things like this, even though we didn't get, very technical on the pricing side. That's the way my brain works too. And so I can foresee myself, some articles I write might be more technical and others might be more on the softer side. So yeah, check it out if you're interested, and very happy talking to you, Mark. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Curtis, it was great having you. And I would recommend to our listeners, go link in with him on LinkedIn, follow him. And then when he releases his webpage, he'll let you know and we'll all be able to see what he's writing. So excellent. This is the time of the podcast where I always plead for you to leave me a review. So if you wouldn't mind, please. And I'm going to start reading reviews that people leave for me just as a way to say thank you and to give you an example of what you could do. But a listener called XL Pappy wrote on iTunes for us, absolutely wonderful pricing podcast. I've been an avid listener for the past 6 months or so and can't recommend this podcast highly enough. Mark has a great selection of guests in and outside of pricing, but all who share perspectives on understanding value. He has a great format for the show and asks interesting questions throughout. If you're curious about pricing and want a great education on the go, check this out. Thank you, XL Pappy. I appreciate it. Also, don't forget to join our community at Champions of Value. It's completely free. There you can get access to everything that I publish that's free. That includes our blogs, videos, podcasts, memes that we put out. If you have any questions or comments about the podcast or about pricing in general, feel free to email me, mark@impactpricing.com. Now, go make an impact.